Ronna McDaniel out at NBC News. Apparently she's like countersuing, or she's going to sue them for disparagement because people actually reported on what she did at NBC after they fired her. That should be interesting. She's getting paid out, from what I've read, $300,000 a year and a 2-year contract. I got to say, I appreciate that. That I think is great. That's always the kind of work that I'm always in the market for. I've attempted to do that many times in my career. I've been successful on a couple occasions, a little bit less successful in others. But apparently they are just really upset about it at Fox News. Remember, they're working at a network which has had a 15, 20-year track record of people having to leave because of sexual harassment, people getting the former employees having to be paid out millions of dollars because of harassment claims. I mean, the place has been decimated by sexual harassment charges, rivaled only by the continuous lying and being sued for defamation charges. But here is Fox and Friends complaining about Ronna McDaniel's ouster.
Brian, at its core, I hope that it's a message to Republicans that no matter what you do, it will be never enough until you say that you're never Trump. That is the red line for the people there, because Ronna McDaniel, as you saw in the interview, changed her position on some things, tried to be a little bit more palatable for NBC, but it was never enough. And she was asked to apologize to the country on air, but they never asked any of the Democrats that objected. You got Jim McGovern, who objected to the Alabama votes. Jamie Raskin objected to the Florida votes. Jayapal objected to the Georgia votes. So when they're brought on NBC, are they asked to apologize to the country? It's just such a double standard when it comes to the liberal opinion versus Republican.
For 4 years, Hillary Clinton said that Donald Trump's an illegitimate president, and he knows it. They all said the Russian situation, the laptop. So why are you letting someone on the air who said the laptop was fake? Do you still have John Brennan on the air, who was one of the 51 intel agents, said this is classic Russian disinformation?
Well, you know, all the people who on their air spoke out were MSNBC or NBC paid political commentators. I quoted this semaphore item today where it talks about how the actual journalists at NBC have to pick up the pieces, essentially, for the decision by management to hire and then fire her, because they're in the business of just trying to objectively gather the news. But if you fire somebody simply because of the ideology that you hired them for, then suddenly their job as an actual journalist out in the field gathering the news becomes very complicated.
Well, Steve, and I agree with that point, and I would have loved to hear.
Wait a second. Can we back up? Because I don't even know if I agree with that point. I'm not even sure I get it. How does it impact the journalists? They can't go to other Republicans now because Ronna McDaniel was fired because people balked at her participation. And we want to let me be clear here. This is not simply a question of like having an issue with votes taken in a state. There was a whole plot to use that as a predicate for overthrowing the election results, the certified election results. They always leave out the plan about like where they're going to try and hang Mike Pence, or they're going to try and intimidate the lawmakers to voting in a certain way. But we go back. I want to hear what Ducey says. And I also love watching. I got to watch this twice because I got to watch Ducey talking about stuff that like Kilmeade gets pissed about, because you're off topic, dude. Why are you even coming up with an explanation for this?
NBC or NBC paid political commentators. I quoted this semaphore item today where it talks about how the actual journalists at NBC have to pick up the pieces essentially for the decision by management to hire and then fire her, because they're in the business of just trying to objectively gather the news. But if you fire somebody simply because of the ideology that you hired them for, then suddenly their job as an actual journalist out in the field gathering the news becomes very complicated.
Well, Steve, and I
mean,
agree
but
with
aside from that, she wasn't fired for the ideology.
I was really listening that time, and I still have no idea what he's talking about.
But I will tell you this, Mark Maron's going to be on the program on Friday to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Majority Report, even though he was not part of the Majority Report. He was at Air America. Mark and I did a show together, and when things were tense between Mark and I, he had the exact same look that Kilmeade had, like where he can't even look at Ducey talking. Like Ducey's talking, and he's just like... like Ducey's over here. It's impressive. All right, go ahead. Is there more?
Field gathering the news becomes very complicated.
Well, Steve, and I agree with that point. And I would have loved to hear those voices also speak up and say, hey, I agree with management that we need a balanced voice.
I don't think the reporters would ever do that.
Well, all the people that were on air claimed that they were reporters and claimed that they were protecting
Chuck Todd was a journalist.
Yeah.
Didn't he say journalist?
So why not those voices?
Kristen Welker.
Also, and I said this earlier in the show, I hate when family business is just aired out for the public. What terrible colleagues they are. When we have disputes, and every business, every family has disputes, you never bring the audience into that. You handle that behind closed doors, you talk as a family, and you come out with a unified front. Apparently, these people can't do that. I wouldn't trust any one of them to work with them on a day-to-day basis if they conduct themselves this way. And
now she did nothing wrong. She gets her contract terminated, and her agency has dropped her. She was the same person when she got the $300,000 contract for NBC, and then they decide they don't want her, and CA goes, okay, you're done.
Well, she is shopping around for lawyers, lawyering up, and there could be a big NBC lawsuit that they're going to have to deal with.
Here's the big question, so stay tuned.
Yep.
Who now would hire her? Because, one of the other channels...
Fox.
Yeah, hire her if you're so concerned about it.
What's that dude's name? Who is Lawrence Jones?
Yeah, Lawrence Jones, yeah.
I'll tell you what disgusts me about this. Because I hate to see family business aired like that, too. And, but I have a more expansive notion of family. I think if you work at any cable company, you shouldn't be talking about anybody else because they're your colleagues, too. They're in the cable business. They're just across the street. They're that studio is on 6th Avenue and like 45th Street, 46th Street. Folks at Rockefeller Center, they're just right across the street. That's what I really find disgusting about it. Like, I don't like to see dirty laundry aired in between cousins, and that's what's going on there.
It's funny, like how pathetic that the stance they're taking is, where like they're basically colleagues or rivals at NBC basically stand up for themselves over management, and you have Lawrence Jones being like, they let the inmates run the asylum, as he said on Twitter. Like, I'm a good hey management, I will swallow whatever you want to shove down my throat.
That is the story
NBC
that I
knows.
like about this, is that there was at least some like workers pushback on this. It is bizarre. It felt like they're trying to turn this into like, conservatives never get a fair shake, but they can't go too far there because Trump was mocking her.
Right.
So they don't have much room. Do we have that Trump mocking Ronna McDaniel for getting fired? I mean, so they can't really hype her. And it's really just, they're trying to, I don't know, they're fishing around for something to say, but they're also very, very afraid of offending Trump in some fashion.
Right. Yeah, because it's like, what? They tried to foist her onto MSNBC, basically. Here's a Trump. Yeah, 1 second. Let me zoom in. Wow, Ronna McDaniel got fired by fake news NBC. She only lasted 2 days, and this after McDaniel went out of her way to say what they wanted to hear. It leaves her in a very strange place. It's called Never Land. It's not a place you want to be. He's really getting into it. These radical left lunatics are crazy, and the top people at NBC are weak. They were broken and embarrassed by low ratings, highly overpaid talent. Bring back free and fair press. Make America Great Again 2024.
Never. Ronna McDaniel was one of the Lost Boys.
Never land.
It's not a good place to be. Never land.
Here is Hugh Hewitt. And the irony of Hugh Hewitt making this argument, well, let's listen to it a little bit, and then we can talk about the irony of this.
Used to be over there. How about this thing?
Well, Ronna is a friend, and I did work for NBC, and in November I worked with Caesar and Rebecca and the whole team. I've never seen anything this brutal since I got started in media in 1990. Ronna is going to sue everyone who defamed her for breach of contract, for intentional infliction of mental distress. They are going to sue for the destruction of her business opportunities that come from being on TV. I think they made a terrible decision, and they allowed the MSNBC bleed to take over their network, and the cult has taken over the news division, and it's going to hurt the 74 million people who voted for Donald Trump are not going to watch NBC News.
Juan, what about that? I mean, all of these talent rising up and saying that she specifically, because she said what she said about the 2020 election, even though she addressed it on Meet the Press, shouldn't be heard on NBC.
You know, I'm puzzled by it in the sense that why don't you just have her on?
I just want to say one thing that is sort of ironic. First off, Donald Trump was mocking her. Yeah, right. 74 million people who voted for Donald Trump don't care about Ronna McDaniel. They hated her. She was pushed out of her office by Donald Trump. Hugh Hewitt is trying to make a case that MSNBC will not allow any dissenting voices on their network. He literally had a show on that network.
You can get sued for causing mental duress.
3.5 years ago. Maybe 4 years ago. He had a contract with them up until 2021. It's just ironic. Go ahead.
You know, I'm puzzled by it in the sense that why don't you just have her on and ask her the tough questions, right? Ask her, what about the 2020 election? What about January 6th? What about being forced out by Trump as head of the party or paying legal bills, having the party pay? Ask the tough questions.
And it would be a unique perspective or a prism by which maybe their viewers don't see.
That's what I think. Now, let me just say, I understand the concern about the brand, that she doesn't fit with the brand, but I'm sitting here on Fox News. I don't necessarily fit with the brand. But you guys have people like me
fit on our brand.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're there. I mean, they have half the network is Republicans.
Yeah.
The morning show is literally a former Republican congressman who came in with Newt Gingrich in the Contract for America. Their afternoon show is literally a Republican spokesperson for George W. Bush. One of the top guests in a weekend anchor is the former RNC director. It's absurd.